Hello everyone, Dark of All Trades here. Now where I live, Sundays are my days off. When I can, it's when I usually run errands with my bestie, and we normally stop for coffee of some kind and do our grocery shopping, hit the bookstore, and really, we just talk about our week and our plans and whatever thoughts we have bouncing around our heads. Afterwards, I typically do some meal prep when I get home and do some cleaning I was too busy to do during the week. Since I live in the United States, my life is generally pretty peaceful while I do this. I live in a relatively safe part of the country, and I'm rarely concerned about people I may run into. All in all, even though I'm openly atheist in a pretty religious state, I'm not really worried for my physical safety at any given time. Well, it may not seem like it, but this all leads to something. So today, we're going to look at a video from a channel called Nas Daily. If you're not familiar with the channel, it seems like he tries to produce short, viral-style daily content about various topics, usually trying to present complex issues in bite-sized, accessible ways. Sometimes this works really well, and sometimes, well, that's why we're here today. The video we're looking at is titled, Why Atheism is Dangerous, which, I have to say, immediately caught my attention. I mean, as someone who regularly manages to make breakfast without causing an international incident, I was pretty curious about what makes my lack of belief in deities so threatening. Also, spoiler alert, he's gonna talk about Galileo, and, well, let's just say his historical accuracy might need a bit of fact-checking. Now, before we dive in, you all know that this isn't about attacking anyone's personal beliefs. It's about examining claims and looking at how we arrive at our conclusions. And hey, if we learn something about critical thinking and historical accuracy along the way, even better. So let's see what makes my peaceful Sunday mornings of coffee and contemplation and companionship so apparently dangerous to society. And yes, I'm being a bit cheeky here, but I think it's a topic that deserves both serious analysis and a touch of humor. So let's dive in.
Only heaven silent for an answer.
For 1 month, I studied atheism, the people who don't believe in God, and I realized it's dangerous to be an atheist.
This is a bit of a strange start. Lil Nas's claim that he studied atheism for a month immediately raises some epistemological concerns that we should address. Atheism itself isn't a field of study, a philosophy, a worldview, or a belief system. It's simply the position of not accepting theistic claims as true. This is a crucial distinction because it helps us understand why the premise of studying atheism is fundamentally flawed. It would be like claiming to study non-astrology or non-stamp collecting. What exactly is there to study about not accepting a particular claim? This misconception often stems from conflating atheism with various philosophical positions that some atheists might hold, such as secular humanism, scientific materialism, or philosophical naturalism. While these positions might be common among atheists, they aren't inherent to atheism itself. An atheist could theoretically believe in ghosts, karma, or any number of supernatural concepts while still not accepting the specific claim that a god or gods exist. I do need to point out that there is a concerning sleight of hand between the video title, Why Atheism is Dangerous, and the actual statement here that it is dangerous to be an atheist. These are two fundamentally different claims that shouldn't be conflated. The first suggests that a position of atheism itself poses some danger to society, a claim that would require substantial evidence and logical argumentation, while the second implies that identifying as an atheist puts one at personal risk. If he's referring to the latter, he might inadvertently be making a compelling case for why religious intolerance and discrimination against atheists are the real dangers in our society, not atheism itself. If what he actually spent a month doing was studying atheists rather than atheism, which would make more empirical sense, it's important to understand that atheists are an incredibly diverse group unified by only one characteristic: their non-acceptance of theistic claims. Any other patterns he might have observed, such as political leanings or philosophical positions or ethical frameworks or lifestyle choices, would be correlative at best, not inherent to atheism itself. This is basic statistical literacy. Correlation does not imply causation, and any responsible study would need to control for numerous sociocultural variables before drawing meaningful conclusions.
See, atheists don't believe in God because they trust in science. They question what they are told, even if it means getting into trouble.
This characterization displays several fundamental misunderstandings about both atheism and the nature of science that need to be carefully unpacked. First, atheists don't believe in science instead of God. They simply don't accept theistic claims. While many atheists do value scientific methodology, this isn't inherent in atheism itself. You can be an atheist for philosophical reasons or cultural reasons, or simply because you find theistic claims unconvincing. There are even atheists who reject significant portions of modern scientific consensus while maintaining their atheism. Furthermore, framing this as trusting in science versus believing in God creates a false dichotomy that misrepresents both science and religious belief. Many religious people fully accept scientific findings while maintaining their faith. Consider the Vatican Observatory's astronomical research or the numerous scientists throughout history who were deeply religious. Science isn't a belief system that competes with religion necessarily. It is a methodology for understanding the natural world through observation, testing, and verification. When we say someone trusts in science, what we really mean is that they trust the rigorous process of peer review, replication, and empirical verification that characterizes scientific methodology. As for questioning what they're told, this attribution reveals another problematic assumption. Critical thinking and skepticism are valuable traits found across all belief systems and worldviews. There are countless examples of religious philosophers, scholars, and believers who have engaged in profound questioning of their beliefs and traditions. Consider the Jewish tradition of arguing with God, Islamic philosophical debates about free will, or Christian theological disputes about the nature of divine justice. Suggesting that atheists have some monopoly on questioning authority or challenging conventional wisdom is both historically inaccurate and potentially offensive to many religious individuals who engage in deep critical examination of their beliefs. Moreover, this characterization seems to imply that atheists are atheists simply because they are more willing to question authority, which is a simplistic and potentially condescending view. People arrive at their beliefs, or lack thereof, through complex combinations of reasoning, experience, cultural context, and personal reflection. Reducing this complex process to merely questioning what they're told fails to appreciate the depth and diversity of human philosophical thought.
For example, Galileo. In the 16th century, everyone believed the sun revolved around the earth, but Galileo showed that the earth actually orbits the sun. He got punished by the church and was sent to jail for the rest of his life, but he didn't back down.
This popular but oversimplified version of Galileo's story requires significant historical correction and contextualization. Let's break down several misconceptions in this narrative that have become unfortunately common in popular discourse about science and religion. First, it's incorrect that everyone believed the sun revolved around the earth in the 16th century. Nicholas Copernicus had published his heliocentric model in De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium in 1543, and several prominent astronomers were already seriously considering heliocentric models. The Catholic Church had actually been a major patron of astronomical research for centuries. The Gregorian calendar reform, for instance, relied heavily on astronomical observations supported by the Church. Initially, many church officials, including Pope Urban VIII, were interested in and supportive of Galileo's work. The conflict that eventually led to Galileo's trial was far more complex than simply proposing heliocentrism. Several factors contributed. Galileo insisted that teaching heliocentrism as absolute fact when he couldn't yet conclusively prove it. His primary proof involving tides was actually incorrect, and he lacked the evidence to address several legitimate scientific objections of his time, such as the absence of observable stellar parallax. The political and religious context of the Protestant Reformation made the Church particularly sensitive about biblical interpretation, as Protestant reformers were challenging the Church's authority to interpret Scripture. Galileo's publication, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, didn't just present scientific arguments. It put the Pope's preferred position in the mouth of a character named Simplicio, meaning simpleton, effectively ridiculing a powerful patron who had previously supported him. Furthermore, the claim that Galileo was sent to jail for the rest of his life is simply incorrect. He was placed under house arrest in his comfortable villa in Arcetri, where he continued his scientific work until his death. While this was still an unjust punishment, accuracy in these details matter for understanding the true nature of the conflict. This case certainly illustrates important tensions between religious authority and scientific inquiry, but using it as a simplistic science versus religion narrative does a disservice to historical accuracy. The reality reveals a much more complex relationship between scientific and religious institutions throughout history. Many of Galileo's scientific contemporaries, including Kepler and Newton, were deeply religious, and many of his supporters within the Church were trying to find a way to reconcile new astronomical discoveries with religious doctrine. Understanding this history accurately is crucial because oversimplified narratives often serve ideological purposes rather than historical truth. The real lesson of Galileo's case isn't about atheism versus religion, but about the complex interplay between scientific discovery, institutional power, personal relationships, and societal change.
Eventually, he was right.
This seemingly simple statement, "eventually he was right," encapsulates several misconceptions about both Galileo's work and the nature of scientific progress that need to be carefully examined. First, it's important to understand that Galileo wasn't simply proven right by the passage of time. While he correctly argued for heliocentrism in broad terms, significant portions of his specific model and arguments were actually incorrect. He insisted on perfectly circular orbits, they're elliptical, rejected Kepler's already published work on planetary motion, and his primary argument about tides being proof of Earth's motion was fundamentally flawed. The heliocentric model that we accept today is substantially different from Galileo's version. The modern understanding of our solar system emerged through the cumulative work of many scientists over generation. Copernicus provided the initial mathematical framework for heliocentrism. Tycho Brahe made crucial astronomical observations. Kepler discovered that orbits were elliptical and formulated his laws on planetary motion. Newton developed the mathematical and physical framework to explain why planets move as they do, and later scientists refined these models further through general relativity and quantum mechanics. This illustrates a critical point about the nature of scientific progress. It's not about individual geniuses being vindicated by history. Rather, it's a collective, cumulative process where models are continuously refined, tested, and improved through things like development of better observational tools and techniques, creation of more sophisticated mathematical frameworks, accumulation of evidence from multiple sources, refinement and sometimes replacement of earlier models, collaborative work across generations and researchers, and probably other ideas that I just can't think of at the moment. Moreover, the phrase, "eventually he was right," implies a kind of historical inevitability that misrepresents how science works. Scientific models aren't right or wrong in absolute terms. They're tools for understanding that can be more or less useful in different contexts. Even today, when we know the heliocentric model is more accurate for most purposes, there are still situations where using a geocentric frame of reference is more practical, like certain astronomical calculations or navigation. This nuanced understanding of scientific progress is crucial because it helps us avoid both the lone genius myth and the oversimplification of complex scientific development into simple narratives of being right or wrong. Science advances through careful observation, rigorous testing, mathematical modeling, and the collective effort of many minds building upon each other's work.
It takes courage because a lot of people will try to intimidate you if you refuse to accept their answer.
This statement raises several important issues about social pressure, belief systems, and the nature of courage that deserve careful examination. While it is true that challenging dominant beliefs can require courage, the framing here presents several problematic assumptions and oversimplifications. First, let me address the implicit suggestion that facing intimidation for one's belief is somehow unique to atheism. Historical and contemporary evidence shows that people of all beliefs, or lack thereof, can face persecution depending on their social context. Some examples you'd say, well, I'm glad you asked. In Saudi Arabia or Pakistan, expressing atheism might risk severe consequences. In highly secular parts of Europe, being deeply religious might invite social ostracism. In parts of India, being a minority religion could put one at risk. In China, certain religious practices face state suppression. And in Myanmar, religious minorities face systemic persecution. Different belief systems have moved between majority and minority status throughout history. The same belief that requires courage to express in one era might be socially advantageous in another. And as such, the same belief might simultaneously require courage in one context while being privileged in another. The consequences of expressing any belief system often intersect with things like social class, educational background, cultural context, political environment, family dynamics, economic status, and professional situations. Moreover, the statement implies that refusing to accept their answer is somehow characteristic of atheism, which again misrepresents both religious and non-religious thought. Religious traditions often encourage questioning and debate, and as such, many religious thinkers have faced persecution for challenging orthodox interpretations. And skepticism and questioning aren't unique to any particular belief system. I would say that true intellectual courage involves things like the willingness to examine all positions, including your own, ability to change one's mind when evidence warrants it, the recognition that uncertainty isn't weakness, and the understanding that questioning should be universal and not selective. There's also a pressure to conform that exists in all communities, religious and secular, and groupthink can affect any ideological position. The social consequences for dissent aren't unique to any particular worldview. This is a more nuanced understanding that reveals that the real issue isn't about atheism versus religion, but about broader questions like the power dynamics in societies, human tendency towards tribalism, institutional resistance to change, social costs of nonconformity, and intersection of personal belief and social identity. Understanding these dynamics helps us move beyond simplistic narratives about courage and belief, recognizing that challenge isn't unique to any particular position, but rather inherent in the complex relationship between individual conviction and social pressure.
I still believe in God, but I am inspired by atheists like him to be brave, to fight for my beliefs, even if I get punished for them.
This is particularly revealing as it demonstrates several layers of misunderstanding and cognitive biases that deserve careful examination. So let me unpack the multiple issues present in this statement. First, there is a glaring historical error. Galileo wasn't an atheist. He was a devout Catholic who believed his scientific work glorified God by revealing the true nature of divine creation. In his letters, he frequently wrote about how studying the natural world was his way to understand God's work. He famously stated that mathematics is the language in which God has written the universe. Using him as an example of brave atheism is not just historically incorrect, it's a complete inversion of his actual beliefs and motivations. This error illuminates several important points about cognitive biases and historical interpretation. Gnostics seem to interpret historical information selectively to support their pre-existing narrative. He has projected modern categories, the atheism-religion divide, onto historical figures where they don't apply, and he's overlooked evidence that contradicts his preferred interpretation. Presentism involves imposing modern conceptual framework on historical figures. It misunderstands how the relationship between science and religion was viewed in Galileo's time, and he's oversimplifying the complex historical dynamics into modern categories. Creating a compelling story has taken precedence over historical accuracy in this point. Complex historical events have been reduced to a simple moral lesson, and with this, nuanced historical figures have been flattened into one-dimensional characters. And moreover, his conclusion suggests that they've learned precisely the wrong lesson from their supposed month of studying atheism. Instead of developing a better understanding of atheistic positions, he's done a number of things like reinforce his pre-existing beliefs, and he's misappropriated historical examples, and he's avoided engaging with the actual atheistic arguments. He's created a false parallel between his position, believing despite opposition, the scientific model, changing beliefs based on evidence, and historical scientific discovery, following evidence despite dogma. His approach demonstrates another few things. His confirmation bias is in action, his selective interpretation of the evidence, his failure to engage with contrary viewpoints, and a misunderstanding of historical context. But this conclusion also reveals something even deeper about how people often approach studying different belief systems. People often study opposing viewpoints in ways that do things like reinforce existing beliefs, and create strawman versions of opposing views, and then turn those potential challenges into confirmation of their position. As I mentioned before, true intellectual courage involves a willingness to change beliefs when evidence warrants it, engaging honestly with opposing worldviews, acknowledging when one's position lacks support, and being brave enough to say, "I don't know."
That's 1 minute. See you tomorrow.
And that's where his video ends. So what were his main points here? Let's take a look. Well, first, he realized it's dangerous to be an atheist. He also saw that atheists don't believe in God because they trust science. They question what they're told, even if it means getting into trouble. He says that Galileo showed the Earth orbits the sun and got punished by the church and was sent to jail for the rest of his life for doing so, but he didn't back down. He says it takes courage because a lot of people will try to intimidate you if you refuse to accept their answer. But he still believes in God, but is inspired by atheists, though he thinks Galileo was an atheist, to be brave and fight for his beliefs, even if he gets punished for them. So what do you think about his points? Do you think he has a solid foundation here? Do you think his month studying atheism was well spent? Or do you think he needs to spend another month in study hall? From there, I have to ask, did I miss something? What do you think his explanation for why it's dangerous to be an atheist is? I have to take a moment to try to break all of this down, so let me see what I can do. The title claim is Why Atheism is Dangerous. This suggests that we're going to talk about how atheism itself poses some kind of danger, presumably to society, individuals, or both. In the actual content, he says that it claims that atheists trust science, and he uses Galileo, incorrectly identified as an atheist, as an example. He then talks about how atheists question things and might get punished. He then concludes by saying that he's inspired by atheists to stand up for his own beliefs. His actual argument seems to be that being an atheist can be dangerous to the atheist because potential persecution from authority figures or society, not that atheism itself is dangerous to anyone or anything. This is a complete inversion of what the title promises. So let me see if I can break down the logical disconnect. The title suggests that atheism creates danger. His content actually argues that power structures create danger for atheists. This is like titling a video, "Why Being Jewish is Dangerous," and then only talking about historical persecution of Jews. It's not just misleading, it's a potentially harmful conflation that places the focus on the persecuted group rather than the persecution itself. I think he has either chosen a provocative title that doesn't match his content, failed to understand the differences between atheism is dangerous and being an atheist can be dangerous in certain societies. He has never made his case for why atheism itself is dangerous. He unintentionally made an argument about the dangers of religious intolerance rather than atheism, or some combination of these. What makes this particularly ironic is that his conclusion, being inspired to stand up for his own beliefs, suggests he completely missed the actual lesson about the relationship between power structures and the suppression of dissenting views, whether those views are religious, scientific, or philosophical. If this was meant to be an argument about why atheism is dangerous, it is a spectacular logical failure. If it was meant to be about the dangers faced by those who question established beliefs, he accidentally made the case for why religious intolerance and dogmatic thinking are the real dangers. That's it for this one. So what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment here? Or do you think I still missed something in my breakdown? Let me know in the comments below. Though if you enjoyed this atheistic study, hit that like button. And if you enjoyed the fact that I'm standing up for what I believe in, even in a more religious state, hit that subscribe so you can see me do it weekly directly on your YouTube's homepage. Speaking of standing up and giving a super thanks is Carl Bart 1, who just says, thanks. Well, Carl Bart 1, thank you. Your support is excellent encouragement for me to keep being loud and outspoken. I'm not going away anytime soon. But speaking of excellent support, I need to thank the support pillars of my channel here, my patrons. Calamitous Anima, Sora, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, Ooga Booga Luga, Anonymous Netizen, Angel, Tarek Alkasab, Gemabom, Kai Henningsen, and Triple Towel. You are all infinitely more amazing than Galileo was an atheist. Thank you. If you would like to be a pillar of my community, you can join them for as low as a single $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. Super thankses are also excellent one-time support pieces if you don't want to do it monthly. Even just sharing the show on your medias of socials helps out a lot. I appreciate all of you that hang out in my Discord and everyone that helps make this channel as good as it is. You are all the rocky pillar I lean on. Thank you for being a part of and helping build my community. And as always, keep learning.
So that's why my religion